Hello, everyone. My name is Dermot Brady. I am Senior Lecturer in Social Work at Kingston University, and I have responsibility for the on-the-job learning element of the apprenticeship program. So this is the first in a number of mentoring support sessions. So these will come to you in different ways. There'll be online live elements, recorded sessions. This one is going to be recorded, and supporting documents and so on, all of which you'll be able to find on a single Teams channel, or at least theoretically. Uh, so this first session really is a kind of brief overview of how we got to where we are. And it might tell you a little something about the nature of the program and our ethos and approach, and perhaps too what we have learned since we started doing the program. So the aims of this presentation: broad understanding of the BA ONS Social Work Apprenticeship Integrated Degree Programme, some initial understanding of your role as a mentor, and perhaps, and hopefully, that you will be ready to start working as a mentor. So these are some of the initial sessions. I'll send you out more dates. The ones here highlighted in yellow. We haven't quite worked out dates yet, but they'll be coming along to you. But you will receive something like this fairly soon. Essentially, we'll run each session twice to enable people to attend. You know, lots of people have lots of different arrangements in their working hours. And of course, we'll record them all and make the links available to you uh, as and when they occur. So how did the program actually develop? How did we get to be where we are now? Now, in common with other presentations, I am not going to try to do death by PowerPoint. I'm going to keep them quite short, if I can. So I'm not going to read everything. Some of you will be very familiar with this stuff, but the slides will be available to you. If you want to take a little longer over them, I suggest you just look at the slides and perhaps pause the recording. So we know really in the past 15, 20 years, there's been reform, as they call it, of social work education. There's been a couple of very critical reports, Neri and Croysdale Appleby in 2014, and this has resulted cumulatively in new providers coming onto the market. Frontline, Step Up Social Work, Think Ahead, you may well be familiar with those, but really what kind of disappeared were employment-based routes, and I think that's because of, apart from anything else, the general lack of funding and investment that is available to employers to pursue those routes. Austerity, I think, has played a role. At Kingston, you know, we run a number of different programs already, post-qualifying programs also. We have a increasingly active research department, and now, of course, we have the apprenticeship program. How did this come to be? Well, there was a series of meetings from about 2018, and this included representatives from pretty much all the employers across London, who were quite clear what they wanted from an apprenticeship program, because this was on the horizon then, and they had the opportunity to say what they wanted, and also what they did not want. They did not want to cut and paste business as usual and BA in social work. Fair enough. So there was a tender process, so that it was put out to contract through neoliberal fashion, and Kingston were successful in acquiring their contract. So we're now the preferred provider for apprenticeship programs across London. Other providers are, of course, available. I think really the thing I want to get across here is that this is collaboration with employers. It has been since the start, and it continues to be so now. There are regular single point of contact meetings, things like task and finish groups and so on. So that's been how we've worked, and I'm hoping that's how it's going to continue. These are the kind of questions we had initially. I'm clearly not going to go through all of these, but they weren't the only questions, because here's some more questions. All of these questions, you can go off and look at them in your own time, were resolved, I'm glad to say. But of course, as we resolve questions, new complexities and difficulties come up, as you might expect in a program of this nature. So we do need those regular single point of contact meetings. Now, there are a series of professional standards that guide the programme, as you would expect, and the ones that you won't probably have come across are the IAT Social Work Apprenticeship Degree Standards. So we'll send you materials, you'll be able to access them. In fact, at the moment, today is the 11th of August 22. They're being updated, and we would expect that that will be a kind of a rolling process as we go forward. But they're quite important to us, and there is a link there that you could follow if you'd like to explore them in more detail. And of course, those links will be on this particular channel. Now, there is a compliance requirement, as ever with funders. APTEM is the system that we use for that. Apprentices have to put a lot of information, including learning logs after every session, all their assignments, things of that nature. There are tripartite reviews that happen. As a mentor, if indeed you are a mentor, other people may be watching this, you will be involved in those and in uploading materials on APTEM, but we'll give you as much help and support as we can with that. At the time of writing, this was 3 reviews. It's shortly going to go to 4. Of course, Social Work England have a set of standards for education providers that we have to comply with. We had a visit from Social Work England not so long ago. I think that went pretty well. And as you know, there's recent developments about standards that students would be expected to meet at the end of their qualifying program. So we're now starting to incorporate those two into what we do. And of course, there's the PCF, which has the distinct advantage of having levels of progression over time. So that's actually very useful to us when you're designing a 3-year course. And of course, it was developed by the profession for the profession. So what does it look like? Well, there's a whole series of apprenticeships. There's been a big growth in apprenticeships across all professions in the last few years. And they generally follow this model where they have an 80-20% mix of on and off the job learning. So that's the kind of terminology we use. Off the job learning is generally what happens in the classroom. And that, as you can see from the 80-20 mix, is usually a day a week or thereabouts. Some of that will be independent study, but there's actually quite a lot of teaching. On the job learning, well, that's where you come in. All our apprentices are obviously employees, which distinguishes them from other learners, perhaps. But it also has some distinct advantages in that they bring the learning from their actual place of work into the classroom, and they take the classroom learning back into their places of work. We'll show you and provide you with information that give you a bit more detail on that, but that's broadly speaking how it works. So it kind of looks a little bit like this. The apprentice is continually developing practice knowledge, reflects in the university, has further experience and input there, and perhaps test out some of their own ideas. At the same time, they can test things in the workplace, they can experience direct practice in the workplace and reflect on that and bring that back into the university. This makes actually for a very lively and engaging course. Well, really, why not be entirely transparent? We love working with the apprentices. They're great fun. There are kind of emotional bits in that, I can pretty much guarantee you, but it's a really active and engaged learning environment. Some apprentices have been waiting around a long time for this opportunity, and they're highly motivated to make the best of it while they have it. You can kind of get a bit more detail. This is a little slide from the apprenticeship program that tells you how you distinguish between what is on and off the job learning. But with any of these things, there's a level of detail perhaps that you don't need to know, unless you do need to know, perhaps if you're a learning development lead or something of that nature. But you can always ask us. We're pretty responsive, or at least we'd like to think we are. So what does the program look like over the 3 years? What is studied? Each year there's an on-the-job learning module, which you will be involved in, but there's also usually 3, and in the final year, slightly different arrangement. But they start off in the first year doing a foundation module, and it's transitions into social work. Now, if you think back to your own training, it's pretty clear really that training for the profession is actually something that changes you both personally and professionally. So one of the early assignments we asked them to do is to write about their journey into social work. That includes, of course, sometimes their own experiences of social work, sometimes their own experience of adverse childhood experiences. But there are many, many different routes into social work. And this is that transition point where they can start to reflect on that and why they find themselves sitting in Kingston University listening to people like me. Obviously, we have in any social work course, we need to understand development across the lifespan and law, social policy and ethics. So we continue on in a similar kind of pattern throughout the years. We kind of, how would I say, increase the complexity of what we're engaging with and our expectations of academic work. In the final year, we have a kind of a slightly strange situation where we're divided into two parts. So 6 months really in the university and 6 months in what's called the endpoint assessment. There are going to be separate presentations on endpoint assessment, so I'm not really going to go into that in detail. But the way the course is set up is that the people involved in the endpoint assessment, which will include employers, staff from the university, people with lived experience, they have to be, how would I say, not involved in the teaching up to that point. So, for example, I will not be involved in the endpoint assessment. It's pretty robust assessment, I have to say, but you can find out more details about that elsewhere and another time. So just so you have the dates, just so you know that we do have the dates, we'll be sending that stuff out to you, and this is the kind of thing that we're working towards. We have assignment dates, and that actually really means that the rest of our timetable is determined by that. So we have to run quite strictly, really, because when we come up against the assignment dates and the processes that happen afterwards, board study and various things of this nature, there's very little flexibility. We keep them very busy. What kind of things do they do on the job? Well, they generally are going to have direct observations, and then they will have to prepare a portfolio. The portfolio will include things like, at different times, agency descriptions, your journey into social work, direct observations of practice, feedback from people with lived experience, and of course, a mentoring agreement and reviews. So in various kind of combinations of those things, they'll always end up in June of the academic year, submitting a portfolio to us for grading. They will also do a viva. Now, a viva is simply a kind of overly complicated university word, which means an individual presentation. One of the reasons we do that is because when they come to their endpoint assessment, they have to do what is called an executive presentation. So really at every point in the course, we're kind of thinking about what are they required to do at the end and how can we give them practice and experience of that assessment process before they get there. So that's really the main reason why we have vivas. So what's your role in all of this? Well, it's a requirement that every apprentice has to have a mentor. So you can be the line manager, more likely it's going to be an experienced member of staff of the team, or even sometimes somebody from another team. Now, you kind of think, oh, why is it so kind of loose and flexible? Mainly because at the moment, for example, we've got 30 different employers that we're working with, which kind of means that we have to take into account a huge amount of diversity in the way that practice is delivered. So in the main, it'll be another member of staff, but it is not unusual to have a line manager do that role. Now, you will be working closely with a sub-regional assessor. So when you get into the detail of it, that person will be able to provide you guidance about what's what, as it were. Now, we would like that person to be, first of all, a qualified social worker. Now, it's very rare that the person isn't, but on occasion that does happen, particularly if we're working with, for example, occupational therapy or maybe youth services. And we would like, again, highly desirable, not essential, that person to have a practice education qualification. So the university sub-regional assessor is the person who's going to be responsible for the overall assessment of the on-the-job learning and practice. So those people, like myself, several of my colleagues who've joined the department recently just for this program, are all experienced practice educators and quite often practice assessors also. There is a slight difference in year 2 where they're having a specific contrasting learning experience of about 70 days in the second part of the year. But again, there will be a specific presentation on that. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail right now. So what support will you need? Well, clear descriptions of your roles and responsibilities, content of the course, how we work with people with lived experience. We have a really active people with lived experience group at Kingston who are involved in assessment, designing core curriculum and teaching and other activities. So they're very important to us and actually are highly appreciated indeed by the apprentices in our experience to date. Now we will have a handbook and you'll be able to get all of this information in one place. As I say, it'll also be on the channel. But our job today really is just to give a brief overview. And our ethos is essentially that we're there to learn and teach. So, in fact, one of the reasons why I'm not sending out the practice handbook today is because we are updating it in line with feedback we've had from employers, from the apprentices themselves, and of course, some of our own ideas and things we've noticed as a staff group. So, in our next session, we're going to specifically look at mentoring, how it came about, and perhaps you could think of your own journey. You may have had a mentor yourself, quite often an informal mentor, but increasingly it's more likely that people have formal mentors. So you'll really, at this point, be going, okay, Dermot, very good. I'd like to know exactly what I will be doing and tell me about the curriculum and the documents and so on and so forth. Okay, we'll get to that. Mentoring is an interesting business. It's definitely not straightforward. Some of you may recognize Anansi there, that the mentoring is a story, and sometimes the end of the story is not entirely predictable. So that's really, I think, enough for today. We really are looking forward to working with you. And we know from the first 2 years of the program, where apprentices are supported well by their mentor, that's what gives success. They need that person in the workplace to be working with them throughout the program. And welcome. Thank you for your input and hopefully see you in the next session. So thank you very much and goodbye.